Hey y'all, good morning. Hope you're doing good today. So I wanted to share a little excerpt from this book that I want to start diving into, and I want to share a lot more. And my plan is to read through the different chapters and then kind of give my own summary of it and just kind of hit on the main points for you all. But to start with, I'm impatient. So I flipped through and found really where I just opened it this morning was cool because the title is called The Self. And if you have it, it's going to be on page 68 of the paperback. But this is a neat little section because it describes what the self is. And because this is a really interesting concept in psychology and philosophy as well. And there's a statement here towards the end, and we're going to get to it, but I'm going to go ahead and share. It says, ancient philosophy is very similar to newly emergent transpersonal psychologies. So, and then it goes on and elaborates from there. But isn't that just so, it seems so true. The fact that it's kind of like these old, preserved, I would just call them ancient philosophies and spiritual belief systems and structures. They hold such wisdom, and it never goes out of date. It never gets old. It's always true. Even like the parables in the Bible and the stories, that are preserved in myth and legend and fairy tale. They all hold these really critical nuggets or morsels of wisdom that apply to all of humanity, just crossing cultural boundaries, time boundaries. It's just and yet we have sciences such as philosophy that it's you have to consider things like profits and biases that come into play in relation to making a profit, and it's like you have to wonder how much of a disservice that, whether intentionally or not, whether consciously a part of the process or not, you have to wonder how much of a disservice that, contamination actually creates for humanity. Because again, it's kind of like you have these preserved ancient morsels of wisdom that I feel like used to be more commonplace, just in society, and you had a lot of generations that would respect their elders, and they would come together, and there would be they would live close together, and they would share their wisdom and pass that down to the younger generations. And it's kind of like that wisdom was more preserved and even more so shared when life was different, throughout history. But in our modern life, if you zoom out and you consider all the different ways that our modern life has changed, all the ways that our modern life is different from our old life, old ways of living, right? Just as humanity, as humans. If you zoom out and you look at that, and then you also compare the ancient wisdom and the way that was preserved and passed on versus the different sciences today, and how it's ever evolving, which is good. But a lot of times it's almost like coming full circle. It's like starting, on this path, thinking you're making progress from the starting point of these ancient wisdom, trying to maybe, I don't know, prove them wrong, add to, modify. And so, you know, it's like the efforts get set off on this path thinking that it's going to be like this, but really it's like this, and it just comes full circle, and you wind up seeing support a lot of times in psychological concepts and studies and everything like that, theories, all of it, for the ancient wisdom. And so that was just, I really appreciated her putting that in the book. And so I just had to share that with you all. It's kind of like in the efforts to disprove or disqualify these old ways as just simply mythical. Instead, it's it's like it had the reverse effect, and it wound up exposing the fallacies of the modern way and supporting the old way. And I love that. But to admit it, that's something totally different, you know, which again is why I really respect that she put that in the book. So anyway, that was a really long opening tangent, but let's go ahead and share, let me go ahead and share this with you all. So this is talking about the self, and towards the bottom of the page is where I'm going to start reading the excerpt, but let me just preface it by saying this section opens with her talking about OCD and how that can affect people. She says she heard about this boy that had this OCD ritual where he couldn't stop washing. I think there's actually a book, that she references called The Boy Who Couldn't Stop Washing, which is interesting because I mentioned OCD tendencies within my family and even within myself, and that's kind of in alignment with me, but I'm not that extreme. But it's kind of, I have had that tendency before to wash my hands, and then like if I touch something, I'm like, oh, I haven't cleaned that yet, let me wash my hands again. You know, so I've kind of danced on that line, you know, but I haven't got to that degree, right? Thank goodness. But she opens talking about that and how she has also struggled with OCD, but she found a cure by reading a poem that she read, that she had wrote herself when she was 10. Again, we have this concept of the childlike spirit, you know, re-entering the scene to save the situation, to save the day, you know. So she says, I believe that my cure, which was immediate and dramatic, was guided by the part of me that wrote the poem, and was in turn accessed by the poem, my higher self. Many modern psychologists, including C.G. Jung, Roberto Assagioli, and Abraham Maslow, advocated a psychology of potential based on realizing the self, on living from that creative core of being. This is a departure from psychologies where no self is posited and in which normality, Freud's ordinary state of unhappiness, is the highest we can aspire to. Right. So, excuse me. Again, I love how that supports the video I put out yesterday, right? So she says, Maslow pointed out that we connect with, here we have the theme of the relationship, or the dynamic of a relationship, the connection, right? Maslow pointed out that we connect with a higher self, capital S self, during what he called peak experiences. Those moments when we feel completely absorbed in the present, transported by nature, delighted by a child, carried off in a creative high, transformed by love. During these moments of wholeness, or holy moments as I like to think of them, we feel joy, peace, security, unity, harmony, love, sacredness, and a vibrant sense of aliveness. Yes, and I mentioned it before, if you have that creative tendency within yourself, if you've ever been just totally absorbed in the flow of creation, you can enter into, accidentally, this sort of meditative state where you feel this euphoria. It's kind of like, this is how I've described it before when I was sharing my story with people, because I had this, there's one memory I have in particular that impacted me, and it's gosh, it's been probably 12 years ago or so. but I was painting alone in my art room in the house, and this happened. I was listening to some beautiful music, and I wasn't trying to paint like a physical object. I was painting just some strokes of color, you know, to get the background started, and I just slipped into this euphoric state, and it felt just spiritually impactful. But it's sort of like analyzing it logically. You think, well, maybe the method is getting your mind, your thinking mind, because it wants something to get busy on, right? Some people just allow it to take them over, and they just succumb to whatever is in front of them, like gossip, you know, and they stay busy in that and drama and stuff. But if you're, you know, self-reflecting and you want to stay true to your moral compass and better yourself and learn and grow, then you're going to still have that tendency of your thinking mind to want to just get busy, but you're going to consciously avoid that kind of stuff, that kind of busyness, and you're going to seek other healthy ways, right? So I think that when you intentionally give your thinking mind a task, a job to do, and it starts working, it frees your true self. Because the issue, I think, and this is more of a, I guess, philosophic talk, but it seems to me like, and I've had another experience too that I'll never forget that's related to this. But when that thinking mind is busy, and it can be done through breathing exercises, you know, or whatever, then your true self becomes, you become aware of your true self and the fact that it's actually separate from your thinking brain. Because in our day-to-day life, I think that we automatically assume that our thinking brain and our true self are one and the same. And it's not. That's my experience. So it's just a tactic to enter into a meditative state. It's to give your mind something to get busy on, and it's pretty cool. It's also interesting that there's the euphoria that comes along with it. Almost like, does that mean that it's the busyness of the thinking mind that's actually creating hell on earth for us? You know, is the thinking mind like the devil, you know, in our life, just keeping us, driving a wedge between, you know, our conscious awareness and peace? So just something to think about, things to think about, to get the wheels turning, you know. But yes, so this vibrant sense of aliveness, I can totally attest to that. So then she goes into talking about quoting Maslow in his landmark book. She says, The Psychology of Being, just expanding on this concept. And she related this to her poem, you know, and how it literally seemed to just, it gave her courage in overcoming her compulsive behaviors. Then she gets into talking about her dark night experience in contrast, and she says it was one of complete fragmentation, where the center that held my personality together was lost. And then she goes into talking about multiple personality disorder. And before I read more of the excerpt here, I want to say this. This is where, when I opened this video, I was saying I wonder if trying to intellectualize things and label things to such an incredible degree does humanity a disservice, because it's kind of like, what if the truth is more simplistic, which is represented in ancient texts, right? And in modern society, instead of just taking this big chunk of truth, this concept, you know, like multiple personality disorder for what it is, or fragmentation, let's just call it fragmentation, you know, and just understanding that can fit so many different disorders, you know, that people seem to experience, right, or witness in others. But the disservice comes when, you know, again, it seems to me that there's, you know, money to be made. And so there's corruption and greed and everything that enters all kind of different industries, you know. And what if that is the driving factor to split this one big truth into, I don't know, 50 or 100 different labels? Because what does that do? It creates specializations for people and things like that. So and look, I'm not saying that, anyone in the field of psychology is automatically guilty of this and greedy and all that. No, I'm just talking about from a bird's eye view, perspective of examining, the differences and why there are such differences between ancient wisdom and modern philosophy and psychology. It's kind of like you just wonder, like, what's the motivating factor, and are we really better off here, just fragmenting big truths into such detail that it's almost like the true meaning, and therefore the true understanding that can actually help heal people, gets lost. It gets lost in translation, as they say. We've just broken all to pieces. You can't cut it any smaller. You know what I mean? So when I was reading about multiple personality disorder, I thought, well, gosh, that's kind of like the whole Jekyll and Hyde thing, which is people that wear a mask, people that, that have they're two different people in one or more, Maybe the difference is when this happens in someone unconsciously and they're not even aware. I think these people are aware of it, though, if I'm not mistaken. I'm thinking about interviews I've seen before of people who have multiple personality disorder, but I think they are aware of it to some degree. But wolves in sheep's clothing, that's intentional splitting. That's intentionally hiding something. But someone who's living a hidden or double life, they're still living. They're still living a hidden or double life. And they're okay with that, which is strange on a lot of different levels. But I don't know. I just feel like sometimes we could simplify some of these concepts, and that would be better, for us. So she goes into talking about this a little bit. She says, an imaginative child will often dissociate or space out during a terrifying or painful situation. These dissociative episodes can become more real than what is happening, literally taking on a life of their own. As a result, the child may develop several different personalities or alters. Research indicates that the average number of alters in a person with MPD is 13. Very interesting. And then this next part was incredible. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to summarize it. But she's talking about, I didn't know this, the different personalities can literally have like differences, physiological differences. One can need glasses and the other doesn't. One can have allergies. Well, the others don't. And they all have different personalities, obviously, right? And one can be right-handed and the others are left-handed. Just wow. That's kind of like, okay, well, no wonder a lot of religious texts, reference literal separate entities, possession, like what Jesus dealt with back during when he walked the earth, right? So incredible. So this next part is the highlight of the message here. She says, under hypnosis, it is often possible for the alters to remember the exact moment of their birth. In the early 1970s, therapist Dr. Ralph Allison reported the existence of a special personality that was potentially present in each person with multiple personality disorder, unlike the others that had no interest in taking over the body and ruling the roost. Its only interest was in the integration of all the fragmented personalities into a healthy, functional whole. In fact, it was often an important source of help with the therapy, and for that reason, Allison called it the inner self-helper, capital S, self, inner self-helper. So here again, we have the helper archetype that's represented in a lot of legends and fairy tales, right? Myth. And so it says the inner self-helper told a consistent story in each individual where it could be accessed. It said, in essence, I have always been, describing itself as an immortal presence that existed before physical birth and would continue to exist after bodily death. The inner self-helper is devoid of fear, guilt, hatred, anger, doubt, or depression. Kind, wise, loving, and compassionate, this core personality sometimes describes itself as a conduit for God's love. Dr. Willis Harman, president of the Institute for Noetic Sciences, notes that descriptions of the inner self-helper parallel ancient descriptions of the self, capital S, from Eastern texts. The Upanishads are one of the cornerstones of India's wisdom tradition, dating back to between 1500 and 5000 BC. The Katha Upanishad states, "The self is not born. It does not die. It is neither cause nor effect. This ancient one is unborn, imperishable. Though the body be destroyed, it is not killed. Smaller than smallest, greater than the greatest, this self forever dwells within the hearts of all." Ancient philosophy is very similar to newly emergent transpersonal psychologies in describing psychological health as the ability to live from the true self rather than from false selves that form to protect us from fear. In the extreme case of multiple personality disorder, fear gives rise to totally separate personalities. Yet this is just an extreme version of what we consider normal. We all have different ego states, different sub-personalities. The perfectionist, the self-critic, the victim, the rescuer, the hero, the complainer, the self-destroyer. These are common false selves that arise in reaction to childhood fears, as I discuss in depth in Guilt is the Teacher, Love is the Lesson. These different selves are clearly not who we really are. They are just the familiar masks we wear in certain situations because they made us feel safe as children. So this is where, this is an opportunity, I feel like what I just read, for someone who's just looking for an argument, you know, could jump right on that, because she happened to use, you know, particular terms. It's kind of like, there's people who like to argue over semantics just because they're looking for any reason to project their shadow self out here and work it out externally. But she's using the word mask, and I feel, when I read that, I think of not so much, you know, wearing a mask for a lot of people as just being conditioned to be a certain way in the presence of certain people because of your childhood, learning that, you know, you can't just express a lot of happiness, you know, like as an example, because they might get mad at you or whatever, or be angry or shame you or guilt you, so you keep that in, you preserve that. So maybe you're shy in the presence of certain personality types because it reminds you of your childhood. As an example, to me, that's not wearing a mask, that's conditioning, you know. But she has great points, and I'm certainly not, this all makes sense to me. I just want to point out that, you know, she's using certain terms that, you know, I feel like there's two different kind of people. There's people that are like, I get what you're saying, and there's people that are like, want to jump on you and pick you apart because you happen to use a particular term here or there when, you know, they're totally wanting to dismiss the context just to have an opportunity for an argument, you know. So just to wrap up this little excerpt here on page 72, it says, needless to say, if we act out of the shadow, our acts are often self-destructive. That's one very good reason to explore the shadow, the inner darkness that teems with emotions, fantasies, and talents. To the degree that we are out of touch with the shadow energies, we are incomplete. We are living from a false self while the creative energies languish. Right. Furthermore, if we don't empty the shadow bag, the contents will compost and build up steam. We can relieve the pressure by projecting the contents of the shadow on others, seeing other people as angry or jealous because we can't stand to see these emotions in ourselves. But if we do this, then we end up going through life literally being scared of our own shadow. Interesting. We can also relieve the pressure by splitting off the contents of the shadow in a more dramatic way into headhunters, snakes, and scorpions, or as the good Dr. Jekyll did, onto our own personal Mr. Hyde. As Jung remarked, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. At no time are we more conscious of the darkness than in the midst of a dark night of the soul. And at no other time are we less conscious of the light, although it has never abandoned us. Like I said yesterday, the Bible says nothing can separate us from the love of God. In its concealment, it forces us to stand on the threshold and commit ourselves to becoming new. If we can trust and believe that our dark night has come in service of the light, then we can breathe through the transition and do the work that is necessary to prepare for the birth. So I really think this is going to be an incredible book. I just wanted to share that with you all. I bought this years ago. I flipped through it years ago. And I just encourage you to purchase it if you have interest. If I can find it online, I will leave a link in the description on where to purchase this book. Just so much insight, and I just hope that I got the wheels turning for you. I hope it was interesting to you today. I hope that you are encouraged to find your own peak experiences, find your own mountaintop that gives you perspective, perspective that gives you peace, that gives you insight, that moves you down the path a little bit further of growth. And because when we do that, we're able to embrace the present moment more so. And as we're embracing each present moment, as we're able and capable, because we've done this work to embrace every present moment as we take one step after another on this path, it's kind of like that's how I see the process of becoming whole, getting in touch with our higher self, getting in alignment with that, walking the path that was always meant for us, the path of abundance and beauty. So I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you again very soon.